Good evening and welcome to the school committee meeting for March 2nd. We're interviewing Superintendent Finalist candidate Dr. David Thomson this evening. Good evening, Dr. Thomson. Thank you
Good
for
evening.
being with us. I have the first question.
Okay.
What did you learn about the Shrewsbury Public Schools today during your day in our district?
All right. Well, I mean, a lot of confirmation, I think, is the short answer for that. I'd heard a lot about the culture and climate of the schools. I got to actually see them in action. Happy children, obviously, well-versed PBIS programs involved, deep caring for the children, happy children in our schools, very inquisitive. Who are you? What are you doing here? And I would tell them, who are you? And what are you doing here? But able to have fun, very friendly, outgoing, and you can just see that it really is soup to nuts, an environment where kids can thrive. So that was confirming. Got to see some of the instructional practices in action. Obviously, there's been a lot of good work around setting up a lot of similarities with how that is approached from classroom to classroom, grade level appropriate as well. A lot of integration of multiple modes of instruction, including technology, hands-on, and exploring. It was very interesting to see the writing program, that EL writing program, in action. And some really good things going here. A lot of people will bring in an ELA program, but the writing is kind of the afterthought, and to actually see that front and center was, really nice to see, because that obviously is a skill that kids are going to need to have. But those are my big takeaways. Teachers who are happy and engaged, and and you could see there was one classroom where the Wi-Fi wasn't working and the teacher had to pivot, and she was all apologetic, and I go, oh, I've been there. I've been there. But really positive things going on. Of course, the middle school kids leaving to go skiing, I was jealous. I didn't have my ski stuff with me, but you could kind of see that connection. Meeting with the high school kids, some of the, and again, this was a cross section that I got to meet with, and that's one thing that I really enjoy doing. Great questions, very engaged in the conversation, really looking for answers, and I'm sure you'll get detailed notes from them on my responses as well. But that's exactly what you want to see. So it was the things that I had hoped to see, and the best of what I wanted to see. I was really glad to get that opportunity. Confirmed a lot of the things that originally brought me to apply to Shrewsbury.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, it's me, sorry, I'm writing. Okay, can you give us an example how you have ensured that all students, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, and academic ability, have equitable access to educational services?
Yeah, so that is, so that's a good, I'm trying to think of a succinct way of answering that. But ensuring, so when you design your classroom instruction, ensuring using, the culturally responsive teaching practices, ensuring that there's multiple ways to access that and to show what learning is there, being, aware of cultural bias and making sure that that is not in our instructional materials, and ensuring that we really are working on a growth model and ensuring that kids are moving forward and growing, are some of the key aspects of that. That is work that we did in Norwood immediately after the COVID break, if you will, around culture responsive teaching, brought in those practices to ensure that children had access. And it's really interesting because they aren't they're really just good quality teaching practices for everybody, to make sure that there is access to the curriculum, and make sure that we are, sometimes that is a different way of instructing, or a different methodology, or some sort of on-ramp or scaffold to access it, and then as students become more and more able to do the work, you can kind of break down or step back from some of those supports. But the ultimate goal is to ensure that everybody is accessing the core curriculum at grade level. And it's a common mistake that people make about trying to reteach and go backwards. And really the research is showing that we want to be teaching on grade level and supporting kids to reach that grade level. And that can be everything from small group instruction to some sort of, tool or schematic device that helps them organize that, and really just being aware of knowing what your kids' abilities are.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Closing achievement gaps require deliberate and data-driven, data-informed actions and sustained focus on equitable outcomes.
Good.
What targeted strategies have you implemented to address close the achievement gaps, and how you measured their impact? Please provide specific examples, including the actions you have taken and
Yep.
outcomes you have achieved.
Yeah, so, and obviously we put together, MTSS models in Norwood, in Mashpee, that was a major part of the work, last year, and is continuing work that we're doing in Wilmington at this point. So, we have benchmark assessments, that we look at. From there, we start, and the programs that I think you use Alex, right? Yeah, that's one you use. We use iReady. Before that, I've used STAR. Actually, even way before that, we designed our own program to do it. It wasn't not computer-based, it was paper-based, but based on common assessments. So, you're starting with the standard. You're looking at where kids are achieving on that, and then you're designing instruction around, again, supporting them to reach grade level. So, so that is, and you're tracking it. You have at least 3. You have, at the beginning of the school year, middle of the school year, end of the school year, and you're looking for how many students are on grade level. The tools are pretty good. You need to kind of make sure that you have all the right levers pulled, but they really can kind of predict what outcomes are. I strongly believe in sharing that information with parents and where their students are at that point in time, as well as the plan to help them catch up. The other piece is, if you have a student that is working at a high level, we should also have activities that are stretching that, so that our high achievers are getting, aren't just doing the same work over and over again. They're getting to apply that in different ways. And back, I know some of you were with us earlier, but back at Raynham Middle School, that was what we did. We had a block of time that we basically, the whole school stopped, dropped, and worked on gaps. But those kids that were on or above grade level got to do things that stretched them, to a higher level. And making sure that everybody had an instructional path through that. And that isn't, you want to do that in real time, in the classroom as well. And that comes back to small group instruction, check-ins with the teacher, progress monitoring. But what I tell teachers is that we really need to be focusing on growth and individual growth, and knowing our students at a high level, really knowing what makes them tick, making sure they feel they belong, and focusing on their growth and their improvement, and focusing in on that, as opposed to, oh, you're below standard. It's like, oh no, you've really done a good job here, and look how much you've grown here, and how much you've done. And that is an encouraging and a coaching model that I think is that really works. Tough. So that so those are structures and programs that we put in place in multiple districts at this point in time. Now it's kind of, from the superintendent seat, and ensuring, and part of that is empowering curriculum leadership in buildings and in the district to ensure that, having those data meetings and discussing that. The numbers are great, but we also need to look at what the stories are behind the numbers, and how kids are actually performing, and what that really means, pen to paper, and not just a number on a screen. But it highlights those areas that we should kind of dig in a little deeper to.
Thank you.
I have the next question. Tell us about a time when data contradicted your initial assumptions about teaching and learning, and what actions did you take?
Change the data. Yeah, so that, and I'll go back to the elementary school that's on the south side of Norwood, where when you look at the school profile, it's a low performing school. And it's not a low-performing school, or kids are not performing at grade level because of the instruction, or because of the teaching, or because of the teachers. 65% of those kids are English as a second language learners. So the first thing they have to do is they have to learn English in order to really access, and especially, the standardized tests that were given at that time. But when I went into that school and actually observed the instruction in that school, it was at such a high level, with such a high level of individual effort that those teachers were putting in to make sure that those kids were making that progress. You could not, in good conscience, in any way, shape, or form, question the work that they were doing. And then when I looked at another piece of data, when I looked at our top 20% of our high school graduating class, 13% of those kids in that top 20% came from that school and were English language learners. So what we, and one of the things that I did to help turn that around was actually kind of invest a little bit more in the English as a second language in that school, to give another half a person to increase. And again, if you do that work when they're younger, when the language part of the brain is active, you can get them quickly into the regular classroom full time with their peers. Obviously still need supports going forward, but by doing that, they access the curriculum quicker. They perform quicker and higher on the tests, and things turn around. But it actually, some of the so people would move into that town, and then I would get calls because they would be in that particular district for that particular elementary school, asking if they could change. And the answer usually was no, because the numbers were so tight to begin with. But I would tell them that you will not find a better school in the district than that one. But that's probably the most blatant example.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
A question on technology in the classroom.
Yep.
We know iPads can be a powerful tool, right? But there's also value to traditional non-technology based instruction and learning. Can you provide some examples of how you balance those two approaches, and ensuring innovation strengthens the instruction but
Right.
doesn't replace?
Yeah, so I look at, technology should do one of two things, okay? First and foremost, it should transform how we're doing the work, okay? And the other thing is that it might make the work faster and easier. So, but if there's something that it doesn't kind of fit in those categories, we really should maybe look at some other methodologies, because oftentimes with the technology, with the screens, we're losing that interaction between students. We're missing some of those writing skills, pen to paper. There's research out there that actually writing notes out helps people remember things better than typing. So balancing and taking a step back and looking at what is really helpful, and this is a good tool to do that, and we're just using it because it's there. And what is the best way to have students do the work and produce the outcomes that's going to give us the best outcomes for them? So that really should kind of be the question. And today I was in a science class in the high school, and they were using the iPads and looking at skin cells, cancerous and precancerous. So they had the pictures on the iPad, and then using those to draw images and fill in notepads. So that's an example of that technology has allowed them, in their seat, without trying to, do all the stuff with the microscope that has to work, which is another piece, but then also be able to do, the written piece as well. So they had a written piece, and we're using technology to actually look at the piece. So there are examples where that is helpful. Otherwise, you wouldn't get as much done as quickly, and you might not complete, the course of study. That's a good example of why you would use technology. But then, they were making drawings of what they were seeing, for the skin cells. Much better than I could, by the way, but that's another story. So, and then there were other places where, the projector was used to put up a passage, and the teacher had written all over it, but then students were using that information with another passage to fill in a graphic organizer for their thought process. Again, that, there was technology, use that so the whole class could see it, probably a little faster than writing it out on the old chalkboard. But that's an example of where technology made something faster and easier for kids to see, but we're still using, appropriate methods to do the work.
Thank you.
Right, we're back to me. School districts are often faced with implementing state mandates with limited resources. What creative approaches have you utilized that resulted in increased student achievement and academic success?
Could you, after that first part, could you say that? I'm having a terrible time hearing everybody.
School districts are often faced with implementing state mandates with limited resources.
Yep.
What creative approaches have you utilized that resulted in increased student achievement and academic success?
Yeah. The old unfunded mandate. We love those. Well, I guess I'll, and this is pre-COVID, this is back when I was assistant superintendent in Blackstone Millville. Resources were an issue. They did not have any sort of one-to-one program at all. Technology was lacking to the extent that it was, that it actually was holding kids back, and opportunities holding kids back. So, we looked at and explored a one-to-one program. There was not any, grants or anything along that line at that point in time to do that work. And basically looked at different ways to fund it, ended up using a lease model, pros and cons to that, to solve that problem. I tell people that, I definitely enjoyed my time in Blackstone Millville. One of the advantages or things that I walked away from was really trying to be creative about how to do that. Another one was that we were, and this is kind of strange, they had the adults using Microsoft Word and they had the kids using Google. So we all moved to Google, but the teachers weren't really comfortable with it. So basically, what I did was we worked with about 3 or 4 teachers who wanted to be trainers. And then through our PD budget, had them offer courses after school to help teachers do it. Okay, because the calendar was already set, we already had the PD organized, we had the people coming in, so there wasn't time during the day. We did have a little extra in our PD budget, and a little bit of we could use some Title II money from the federal government to do that. So, and that was a creative way to get the knowledge base of the teacher. And almost every teacher took at least one course, because not only did they get it for free, they also got PDPs to do it, and the people who were presenting it got paid to do it and also got PDPs. So it was a win-win for many people. But I don't know if that categorizes an unfunded mandate, but those were shortcomings and creative ways of solving those.
Perfect.
In terms of the school budget, right, can you walk us through how you develop a budget for districts to align to the district's goals, but also make sure that the necessary resources are in place to drive the program?
Yeah. There was a time everybody was talking about zero-based budgeting, which I also kind of found kind of comical, because you have a budget where 80% of it is personnel and you can't really zero that out. But anyway, but I do ask that at a building level and department level, we start at close to zero and look at what are the things that we have, what are the things that we need, and build it from there. Anything that we are doing that is new, I want 2 questions answered. One is, how does it align to our strategic plan? And I actually ask that people put those item numbers on the budget. And the other thing that I will ask them, and I tell them straight out, how does this impact good outcomes for our kids? So that's the philosophy. I would rather have somebody tell me what they really need than to be limiting that because of some sort of number. I usually will, depending on the year, will give them, okay, we're looking at maybe a 2% or a 3% or a 4% or whatever it might be. This is what we're going for. Doesn't mean everybody's getting 4%. But, I do want to hear what you need as a building leader or as a department leader to make your department, your school, the best it can be. I want that on the table. I want to discuss that. So, all those numbers come in. They're compiled in the business office, and then we sit down and those department chairs and those principals come in and they present their budget requests. And we look at, class size, we look at, incoming needs of children, we look at programs we want to, and, we make some initial recommendations of we think we can do this, we don't think we can do that. But I'd rather have that conversation and know what those wants and needs are. And again, those have got to be aligned to the direction of the district strategic plan, and it's got to be aligned for what's best for kids. Because that's what we're here to do, right? And then from there, put together a budget and come with, superintendent's recommendation that is fitting into what we are needing. The one thing that I will do early and often is I will explain, the elevator speech about what the budget drivers are and what the budget needs are. And I will have that conversation with the town manager. I will have that conversation with, obviously, the school committee, select board, FinCom members, whomever will listen and have those conversations early and often. So it's not a surprise. Everything is transparent. Everything is upfront. These are the things that that are going to be driving our budget this year in Wilmington. Just on Saturday got presented to the FinCom of 4.85% increase. But we just settled 4 contracts, so that's a huge piece of that. That's transportation, as you well know, is a budget driver, and special education costs. The numbers have not increased drastically, but the cost of those placements have increased drastically. And that has been a message since the end of October with people on the town side and the school committee about what those budget drivers are and what they are going to mean for the budget. And then, flip around going forward, they have about 75% of their staff at the top step. In about 5 or 6 years, there is going to be a large number that are going to be retiring. And the other thing that I've discussed with them is the need to be forward-thinking about building partnerships, because we're going to have to replace these people, which is going to be difficult. So that isn't necessarily a budget piece, but that is forward-thinking, doing 5-year projections, which I know you guys do. We just started doing in Wilmington and looking at what those costs are going to be now that the contracts are settled, because that's 80% of the budget right there. And knowing what those, and sharing those up front. So the town has some sort of inkling as to what the costs are going to be to keep the people in the classrooms.
Thank you so much.
Following on the same lines, how will you communicate the complex financial information to school committee and also to the broader community? Please provide specific examples.
So the challenge of school budgets is that they are more complex than your average home budget. So, which is where people come from when they look at budgets, for most of us, right? So what I have found to be effective, and again, I believe in strategic, clear communication and doing that early and often, is, what are those challenges coming up? So that would be something that I would share. We started our budget, this item is a problem, this means such and such. We just settled 4 contracts. Just salaries alone are 7% increase from last year to this year. So getting that message out, getting it out in a clear way. And what I'd like to do is I kind of like to stack one on top of the other. If you come out with a whole bunch of stuff that can be confusing at once, that can be hard to digest. So I kind of like a part whole sort of piece. This is a problem. This is the first number one. This is where deep conversation about bus transportation. We could go out to bid, but that probably is going to be an increase of about 7 or 8%. We have a clause in our contract where it's only a 6% increase, and the difference is X amount of money. So we're having that conversation early. And we're having it in public. We're having part of the meetings. Hopefully it's getting covered by, local cable. It's getting out there with the local paper or something along that line so that people can hear that. You guys have, the journal that goes out 3 times a year. That would be a perfect time to communicate some of those challenges going out. but it also needs to be consistent. So I'm not going to share something before I'm ready to share something, before I'm sure that that's what it's, because if you go out and you say this, oh no, it's that, and you're rolling back and forth, you lose that credibility and people don't trust what you're coming out with. And one thing that I tell my school committees is that, our message has got to be consistent. What we say is going to need to happen, we have to be willing to stand behind that. A lot of places will come out, oh, we're going to cut, out X number of million, that's going to mean, 30 jobs. And then 2 weeks later, oh, we found ways to only cut 10 jobs. I was like, okay. If you're doing that, people are like, I'm not even paying attention because it's all over the place. So making sure that you have the right message, the absolute message before you start. You can say, oh, I'm looking at a deficit, I'm really concerned about that, we're still working on it. That's one thing, but when you start talking about positions or programs before you're at that final number or at that, 10th stone down, that's a problem. So that's kind of how I approach that, yeah.
What is your vision for overcoming the need for an expansion of Shrewsbury High School simultaneous with the need for a Proposition 2.5 override?
Well, that's going to take a little bit of a deeper dive. But, I have actually, passed that large $8.6 million override and then 2 years later come back and ask for another $178 million for a middle school, and managed to get both of those.
That was in Norwood?
This is in Norwood, yeah. And then this year I jumped in to a building project vote that was on the 13th of, a town meeting on the 13th of September, and a special ballot vote on the 16th of October for a $180 million elementary school. So I laughingly say I'm 3-0 in override. So, we'll see how it goes. But it comes down to, again, clear, strategic, consistent communication. I don't know Shrewsbury well enough to say, there's capacity and appetite for both simultaneously. But I think that, the first step is to articulate what it means, what an override means for Shrewsbury, and the fact that you've had fiscal stability, and I think this is an important thing, had fiscal stability, been able to plan and strategically put things in place for many years in a row is part of why this district is so successful. So we would need to articulate those stories. We would need to put it in personal, not numbers. We need to talk about kids and outcomes. Okay? And then put that out there for why this is important. When it comes to the building, there's certain parts of it. I was watching the kids leave from the cafeteria. Yeah, and I'm not afraid to stand in the middle of that as a salmon swimming upstream. But you can definitely tell you get kids eating lunch in the hallway and not in the cafeteria because there's so many kids. And that's not even talking about the classroom space and how it's being used. So the thing that we did in Norwood is early and often we started articulating what the needs were and where the shortcomings were with space, so that people had an understanding of that before the project photos and everything else came out. In Norwood, we walked through with local cable and showed the heating elements that weren't supposed to be working anymore, and showed the puddles and holes in the roof and all these sorts of things, so people understood the condition of the building and how it really couldn't be repaired. But what are those deficits? How are we articulating what those deficits are as information for the community, and starting at that, in both cases, those base levels? This is why, and then the next layer on top of that, and the next layer on top of that. So you're building a case. You're letting folks have time and understanding with what is being asked. Now, whether both can happen at the same time, that's a question. As residents of Shrewsbury and people who have been here a lot longer than I have, I would look for your advice on that, working with the town manager. But that fiscal stability, I think the important piece there, that fiscal stability has allowed you to work consistently in systematic way to produce the outcomes that are just absolutely outstanding.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, how would you balance financial realities with maintaining education quality during a budget reduction? And could you give us an example of what you would reduce first?
Yeah. So and it's never fun. I mean that when you don't have everything you need it's much easy. It's that year after we got the override was the easiest budget year I will ever have in my entire life, and I still go back to that. But every year you have to make some hard choices about what can be done in the budget and what cannot be done in the budget. It's not an open checkbook. I think, again, consistently your strategic plan, which is very well done, is your guiding light and should be used to tell the community about where we are going and why we are going there. So when it comes to those reductions, what can you do to keep whatever process it might be, whatever initiative it might be, moving forward, so you're not losing, because you're standing still, you're falling behind, right? So where are those spots where you're kind of maybe further ahead, and you could, slow down to 30 from 60 miles per hour, and where are those places where the resources need to be invested to move forward? Ultimately, the classroom is the key piece of this entire organization. That's where all the magic and wonderful things happen, is in the classroom. And preserving the quality of what happens in that classroom is paramount. Oftentimes, and this is, your average person at home doesn't necessarily understand all of the ripples involved with doing different instructional models. And they know they have a teacher and they have so many kids in the classroom. They don't understand who that other person is in the classroom and what services they provide, or what services are provided and when they're provided, so that kids are moving forward. But there is definitely education to be had around investing in programs for student success that will actually save you money in the long run. Okay, so having push-in services that are at a high level, a high inclusion model, where you're including as much in, obviously there's always exceptions, but ensuring that kids are, as much as possible, are getting core instruction with their peers in the regular classroom at grade level is paramount. And if you invest in the ability to do that early on and throughout, then you have less students that maybe progress to a point where they're looking at it out of district or substantially separate. And they're better served. And, ultimately, they are better served, and they will have a better chance of coming out at the other end of the rainbow and being successful.
Thank you.
In terms of communication and building trust amongst the school community.
Yeah.
As a superintendent, how do you ensure that the staff, families, and community members with differing viewpoints feel genuinely heard and respected? And can you share any specific strategies around how
Yeah.
you go about that?
Yeah, that's something that I do really well. I'm a very good listener. I've learned to kind of cull back my stature, so I'm not imposing at times. I'm highly respectful with people. I mentioned people were in the room earlier, but if someone calls or sends me a message, I try to get back to them within 24 hours. If I can't, I have an assistant or someone in the office or someone else, say, Dr. Thompson got your message, he just can't get back to you today because he's out of district or whatever it is, but he's going to get back to you tomorrow, whatever it might be. So it starts with treating people with respect, listening to what they have to say, trying to understand perspective. That doesn't even necessarily mean you might agree with it. Being honest in your clarification or your communication with them. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is not being some person that's hiding, in a closed door someplace. You've got to be out. You have to be in the school. You have to be in the classrooms. You have to be at community events. Everyone's gonna want to know what the new guy or the new gal, who they are and what they do. And that's everything from, attending community events. You've got the fall, festival, the fall, Shrewsbury thing. You've got the winter. So those are things that I would be at. I was at the they had a Harvest Fest in Wilmington. I was there. I was, in Mashpee, they do a big Christmas parade at the Mashpee Commons. I was there with hat and gloves on. It was a little cold that night. Dragged my poor wife. I told her that I would buy her dinner, and that worked. So I wasn't alone. But, being in the community, being seen, taking those opportunities, coffee hours, office hours. I'm not quite sure what the practice, but I've done both where people can drop in. Setting up a table, outside the basketball, well, maybe inside the basketball game, but no, outside, so people can drop by, having coffee at the library, a couple mornings, a couple afternoons throughout the year, trying to interact and get responses from people. Going to games, I usually, if I have a night meeting, try to look at the sports schedule and see if there's part of a game that I can, watch kids at. As far as staff goes, I like to spend time in residence where I will schedule times where I will just be in a building all day. And people can drop in and talk to me. I think the next time I do it, I'm going to bring donuts or something so more people will stop by. I'm trying to tweak that a little bit. I do a bi-weekly podcast and put out information so people and ask people for suggestions for topics. Sometimes I get them, sometimes I don't. If there's something coming up and we want input, doing a town hall, all of those things, present yourself as an active listener and someone who's engaging the public and building trust.
For me, what would be your number one priority during your first 6 months in this role?
Yeah, so my first priority is to meet people, build relationships, and go on a listen and learning tour. I come in with an approach where I'm doing basically what they call a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and ask the same questions from multiple groups, get multiple perspectives, and see where is the consensus on where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are, where are the opportunities for us to work. I don't really like the term threats, but where are those potholes? Those ditches that you don't want to drive off into that you'll never get out of. What's the third rail, right? So I'm really trying to learn the district, and then from there develop questions in inquiry of, what is this? Why is this? Could you tell me more about how this works? What's the relationship over here? So I'm listening and learning. This is a district that has been well led for a long time by a leader who is well thought of, to say the least, and rightfully so. But being respectful of that and trying to learn what has been done and what the next steps are to continue the improvement and overall outcomes that you have here. That is a process. I don't come in. There are other people who will come in with a whole list. Oh, I do this. I mean, there's one person out there. Every district he went in, they would buy small vans and move special ed district in transportation in district. It was like a card that person. I'm like, well, they don't even. First of all, this district doesn't have many that we're doing that with, and it's a cost they don't need. But that just was, oh, look what I did. I'm not that person. I want to learn about the district and how to make this district the best it can be. Not, I have a lot of experience from other places, but it's got to fit in this context and construct with the people in this district. And I'm fully aware of that. Kind of goes a little bit back to my collaborative leadership style and adaptive leadership style, where it's not my way or the highway. We are looking at what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how to make it better. And ultimately, I think I mentioned it earlier, if the bus runs me over, I would like the other people to know what and how we're doing it, and the bus will continue, the train will continue down the track or whatever it might be. But, yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
And you've answered my next question, so it's back to you, Jeff.
Oh. How would you drive cohesive teamwork when you are new to the district?
Could you do that first part again?
How would you drive a cohesive team? When you are new to the district, within like how you
How do I build teamwork? Well, first of all, so the first thing is it starts with trust. And part of that entry process about asking questions and giving people individual time so that they know they're being valued and heard is the first step in that road. The other piece is supporting them, in their growth, in their development, and achieving the goals that they want to achieve. Then it's setting up a climate where everybody has a voice in a respectful way, and we are still focused on our vision and mission, and that's what's driving us. But there is honest, open conversation without, hidden agendas, and hurt feelings. From meeting the folks that I've met today, I am very confident that would be a quick process. When you speak to the people who have worked for you, they will tell you that I'm extremely supportive. I always make sure that we're doing the best for kids, that, no matter what the issue is, they can call me and I'm going to help them get it solved, and that they feel supported. And that builds that trust, that builds that team together. And I tell the team straight up that I do not want a bunch of yes people around me. If I'm asking a question and I'm wrong, I want you to tell me I'm wrong. Which is what, if I didn't want to know the answer, I wouldn't ask the question, to be honest with you, right? But I'm going to ask those questions to ensure that I'm right, especially being the new guy. And being, I'm a big reader of Brene Brown. So being that authentic and vulnerable leader sets the stage for other people to be authentic and vulnerable.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How do you navigate situations in which a parent calls for changes that you believe may not align with the long-term interests of the district? How do you balance responsiveness with principled leadership? And then from there, after making a significant decision, how do you engage with criticism for that decision?
Yeah. So I think, with the parent that has a different view on things, I think, again, that respectful building trust, it starts with listening, understanding that perspective, and validating that they have a right to that perspective. And then, maybe, might want to dig into it a little bit different, check with some things, what have you. I often find face-to-face meetings are more beneficial than something on the phone or something along that line. And then, have that conversation, take notes, really spend the time looking at it. Don't just like, no. That doesn't build that sort of relationship. But ultimately, and again, having a group and a team looking at something and making that decision, not that I'm, chicken to make a difficult decision, but to make sure it's the best decision, often helps. And then, so going through that process, I'm trying to, we had people who were upset in Norwood about changing leagues, and people had definite opinions about that was a bad thing to do because we had always been in this large league, even though we were getting creamed every time. We've had 10 kids get off of a cross-country bus and face 50 kids running, and you're never going to win and when that's the case, right? But had the people that were not happy with that decision in the room, and part of the conversation about improving our athletics program. So although they didn't agree with the outcome, and actually that was somebody else's decision, not mine, I inherited the fallout. But by doing that, but by doing that, at least build some credibility and some trust going forward. You might not necessarily agree on everything. That's okay. And I think the other thing is that, if you're wrong or the action isn't there, owning it. If it's not the right decision. And as far as facing the criticism, that never happens. No, as far as facing the criticism, as long as I'm grounded in doing what's best for my kids and what's best for the district, you have to live with a little bit of criticism. So, that's just, kind of the nature of the beast. And you can't harbor it going forward. It's got to be one and done. You got to move on. So,
Thank you.
In terms of making those challenging decisions, from a superintendent perspective, whether it be budget cuts or programming changes, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that transparency between, the district and the community?
yeah, I think, well, it's right out there. And Norwood also had representative town meeting. And, during that presentation, my, time in the sun, that is right out there, what this means and what that is. The other thing is, newsletters, you guys have got so it's got to be right out there what this means. And, and sometimes people will be unhappy with that. And, it's like, well, I'm not happy about it either. I mean, I'm not looking to cut a program or let somebody go or change this. It was working pretty well. I wanted to add this step and this step. What are you gonna do to help us get back there and do that? Ultimately, the taxpayers and town meeting make the decisions on what funding the schools get. Did you run for town meeting? Are you there voting? Are you there calling your town meeting rep and saying this is important? But I also think we need to be, strategic and really thoughtful about that. When we do, when and if we do have to do that. And there's always things that don't, maybe additions that don't make the budget. And it's a little bit different than moving backwards. But, being clear about what those are, and if you say it's gonna happen, you can't chicken out at the last minute and do a swap, because then you're not being transparent.
Can you share an example of how you built trust with a community that felt disconnected from its school leadership?
I'm trying to think if I've actually been in that situation, to be honest with you. Yeah, well, and no one really wants to talk about COVID, but there was a segment of folks that did not necessarily agree with all the changes that were put in place at that point in time. What I did was I started doing weekly Facebook Lives with people, asked them to send me questions ahead of time, and I would answer those questions online about why, what for, and what have you. And no one called me for an Academy Award or anything along that line, but it really made inroads into what the thought was behind the decision. It also, I think, showed that there was some angst about all of these decisions. And you still had people that were not happy, but that number really shrank. But by doing that outreach, and it's tough because it was not necessarily a great format where you had someone like moderating, so I'm trying to read questions as they're coming in and answering them at the same time. Talk about criticism. I got criticism from one town meeting member that I said too many times because I would stop and I tried to explain to her. She was an older lady. I said, well, it's kind of difficult to kind of read the question and answer the next one at the same time. But she kind of got it eventually. But it is opened myself to criticism, but it was important to try to do those. One thing that we did is that because in normal times, you would look at something, you would call other people that had looked at different programs and how they had done it, and take all this information other people had experience that are in the state and whatnot, and then come up with your own plan based on prior experience. So that was not the case with COVID. We weren't getting a lot of we weren't getting a lot of really great guidance and things like that. And, what I did was I looked globally and looked at what they were doing in Finland. And I set up our program so it was done similar to them, where they had basically pods. I had kids that would come in Monday, Tuesday. Other kids would come in Thursday, Friday. Wednesday was everybody remote. They would do a half day online, and the other half of the day they would do project-based learning. But those two pods never really mixed. We didn't have one case come from the schools. So, obviously, looking back at it, it probably would have been better to have kids in school, blah, 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 all these other sort of things. But at that point, the focus was, not having COVID spread, right? So, and we managed to do that. And they still got the same amount of school time that they did when they were in school. So, actually, the commissioner was out sitting in my office, Jeff Riley, and it was right after they had come out with the reconfiguration, where they told everybody to add more hours to their school day and whatnot. We were already over what they were saying. So he, like, how'd you do that? I go, well, we started with this and we did that, and I got $750,000 from the town to hire an extra 25 people to do a fully virtual school. And you don't get to do that unless you've built that trust with the FinCom to go into the reserve account to get me that money. We ended up giving it all back because ESSER funds came in, but at that point, we didn't know, so.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? So how did you do that with your unions? Because I would assume you had to negotiate with your unions for this model. So how did that
They
go?
were right at the table with us. So we basically had, in-person teachers, and then we had a virtual teacher for each kind of team. Okay, so you would have two teachers teach small groups, half the class and half the class in person. And then on the virtual days, they would meet with the other teacher and do virtual learning all day. So it wasn't like, oh, here's your assignment, bye. There were people online teaching them. And then the virtual school was just a full day of online school. They would go off and do projects and have groups and whatnot. The other challenge to that actually was we didn't really have one-to-one computers at the elementary school. So we had to get, all the computers out. We had to get and the elementary teachers had never done that before. We had to train all of them to do all of that, support all of them. And part of that was, in that afternoon when the kids were doing the project-based learning, okay, the teachers were planning together. Because in order to have those two teachers in sync with the virtual teacher, okay, there had to be a extended planning time to do that. So it was
How
fun.
long did that take? What was the time process?
I did it in 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
No,
Excellent.
no, it was the it was the longest summer of my life. So basically, started in June when this started rumbling around, and through the end of July. So six
Okay.
6 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
6 weeks, and again, sitting with the principals and the building leadership and the central office leadership, looking at every aspect of that to get it in place, and the union leadership involved in those conversations.
And the school committee was involved as well? Okay.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What is your plan to get to know the school committee? How do you plan to build and maintain a transparent, cohesive, and strong working relationship with the members?
Yeah, so part of that entry plan would be one-on-one meetings with me, so that would be a good start. I don't know if we do a joint retreat or not, but that would be another opportunity that would be there. I'm constantly, if there's something that's bubbling up, so my feeling is that you guys are out in the community, you're at the soccer fields and the grocery stores and that sort of thing. I want to make sure that you know if there's anything that's bubbling up that you might get approached with in any of those venues. And, you know, while I might not be able to convey every single detail, but enough that you know that we are aware of it, it is being addressed and investigated and, you know, worked through. Conversely, that open line communication comes the other way. If there's something that you're hearing out in the community that I don't know, you know, please call me so that I'm in the same position and I can get ahead of it before it grows its own personality. Yeah. But it's a close working relationship, and I'm sure that, you know, those subcommittees I would be part of working together. You know, and again, it's an open. You know, the only time I don't really have my phone with me is if I'm asleep, and even then, if you're on my magic contact list, it will ring through and wake me up. But you know, we might save that for the chair. But that's there because we have to. This is a government's team, okay, and we have to be in sync and work together to ensure that we're moving this district forward.
Do you do weekly calls with your members?
Do I do
Weekly calls with your members, like, or before?
I
a meeting?
can. I mainly, each district does it differently. I have worked mainly through the chair in a lot of things where we would have weekly calls. Currently, I meet with the chair and the vice chair after every single school committee meeting, and there is a text chain between the three of us if there's anything else that pops up. If there's something that I think the whole committee knows, then there is an email that goes out to inform them. I just sent an article out of the New York Times this morning to school committee and we have a cell phone policy committee to the people leading that. About, you know, cell phones and what some of the research is showing about kids working around yonder pouches and that sort of thing to inform their practice. So anything that I find that I think is going to be helpful for the work that we're doing, I'm going to share with you. And I'm constantly monitoring, you know, educational articles and research and such. So, new hobby. So, but I think it's important that you folks have information. It's definitely important that I have information, especially as, you know, someone new in a district. You know, if you're hearing something at the grocery store, they're asking you a question, hey, I gotta ask this question. Okay, well, we'll get an answer out. You know, and I've had, you know, my last podcast was on calling snowstorms. So, so, you know, and that was a suggestion. Yeah, you know, you could really, you know, do something with, you know, with this that people would enjoy hearing, you know, the virtual hell you go through making that decision. But, yeah, and sometimes they're fun, and I've interviewed kids, you know, from Mashpee and whatever, but really focused on what's going on in the district so people can get another way of doing that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, can you describe a time when the school committee did not support your recommendations? What steps did you take to listen, communicate your perspective, and find common ground?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it earlier. We were doing a school start time change, and COVID happened, so it was put on the back burner. And you know, then after COVID, it came back, was brought up as a conversation, and there was a point where there was a recommendation made, and it was a wide range of start times. And, you know, I talked to the chair ahead of time about, you know, this is important to keep this rolling forward. And members of the committee wanted to table it and have us come back 6 months later, which only, instead of it being a year before the change, ended up being 6 months before the change. And so that was difficult because you know, and I told them that it was difficult, but went back, you know, and worked with them and did the work to get the answers that they wanted to and moved forward with that. The problem was when they took that vote, there was a whole bunch of people that turned off that switch. Even though, and this is the troubling part, even though it was in the local newspaper, it was carried on the local cable. And it was in newsletters that went out. So that was difficult, and both of us got feedback, not criticism, based on that this was being. And I think, and part of it is that a time change can be very difficult for a family and working families, and I get that, but it wasn't done in a way, we did work through it, but it probably was a very difficult time because everybody was doing one of these, which is not conducive to cohesive leadership, so we had to work through that.
So that was a situation where it was more the timing of the decision to change the start time. They ended up, instead of a year timeline, it was only the 6 months. How about a situation where there was no agreement? You might have had something that you felt strongly about, and the school committee ended up saying, no, that's not something we want to fund, or how would you, if you've had that happen, how do
Yeah.
you move forward after that type of a disagreement?
I think we had those conversations as a budget subcommittee and reached agreement before we got to that public vote. And sometimes you have to agree to disagree. I tell people I don't bring a lot of ego to this. I'm not always right. I have people at home that remind me of that. But ultimately, there's a governing board that oversees, especially those financial decisions. I have to go, I'm the employee of the board and I have to support that. I think at some point you have to agree to disagree. You've made your point, you've made your case. And you have to move on. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're not going to agree on the next thing. And if you're going to take it personal, you're in the wrong business. But there have not been, I have not had a case where I've brought a budget to the whole school committee, and again, we have a very active subcommittee for that, and not walked in there lined up. We've had difficult conversations in that subcommittee, which is part of why before that, they didn't have a subcommittee. And it was very tough, because I remember watching the school committee meeting, and they got their budget book, and they're looking for cuts. 5 of them just sitting there, looking for cuts. And mentioning positions and people's names and the whole thing. It was not. And I said, we can't do this, because you haven't made a final decision, first of all, and you got people worrying about their job, and they're looking for other jobs, and then we're looking to replace them. Usually if I have a recommendation or a strong, I have a rationale behind it. It's not just because I feel that way. And I will articulate that, and then, we will go from there. But I think try to get those conversations done, honest communication, why people feel that way. They had, and it's always there's always this, do we go to town floor and fight for the money conversation? That's one that's come up. And it's one you have to really be careful about, because you can really negatively impact that relationship with your town manager, the FinCom select board, if you're going around them to town meeting and doing it repeatedly. And is that really going to get you where you want to go long term? Sometimes thinking long term is as opposed to short term, and having those conversations. But ultimately, once the superintendent recommends the budget and the school committee votes on it, it's your budget. Your budget.
Yeah.
So, and fully realizing that, and realizing where my lanes are, and the fact that it's part of why this is such a dynamic position, right?
Thank you.
Yep.
How would you describe your leadership style and how it has evolved over time?
Yeah. So I look at. So I have a very collaborative leadership style. I have a very adaptive leadership style. I like to be, so I look at, often people look at leadership as the person who's in charge and do this, do that. That really is not the case. Effective leaders really support and develop other people with a common vision, goals, strategic plan to get the work done and to move the organization where you need it to go. And there are times when you have to be out front leading the charge, and there are times when you have to be in back, and you're cheering on the people who are out front. And there's times when you're on the side and you're a coach, to get that work done. I have spent a lot of time practicing those skills. I joke that my first leadership opportunity was a 12, 13-year-old patrol leader in a Boy Scout troop, and burnt pancakes was a great bonding experience. But, seriously, those are where people say, well, a lot of those early leadership mistakes happened when, I was much younger. I have made a career out of investing in building capacity in other people and capacity in the district through other people to do the work that needs to be done. The superintendent cannot be everywhere all the time. I'm not going to be in a 7th grade math class and also in, the 10th grade biology class. It's just not a possibility. You have to work through people to do that work. Different people need different things. Being available, building trust, having open communication, and being supportive are key to that. And I'm looking, those people that I hire to fill those, I'm looking for certain things. First, people laughing when I say this, but a love of children, that has to be there first. The second thing is a growth mindset. They're really looking to grow and improve. And the last thing is a team approach. If you have I can teach you anything else. I can't fix that part of your character. So this has allowed me to have the opportunity and the honor to coach 2 state principals a year, a blue ribbon school principal, working with an interim principal who just walked out of the classroom a month and a half ago and is now serving as the principal of a 250 student elementary school. And those are things, and again, I tell people I'm still a teacher. I'm just not teaching kids as much as I used to. Now I'm teaching adults. So all of those leadership experiences that I have, all of that I bring to the table, I try to help other people benefit from my experience, my approach, my child-centered, mindset, and trying to improve the lives of our kids.
Thank you.
What aspects of the district or the superintendent responsibilities do you expect will stretch your leadership the most, and how do you plan to grow in those areas?
I'm already overstressed. No, I'm kidding. Well, I think there's a lot to learn, and digging into that with detail. So that first year of entry, right, when you're trying to learn the district, trying to build relationships, try to establish who does what and how everything works. That's hard work. There's a lot of time to do that. The advantage is that I have done it multiple times, and I'm honestly very, very good at it. Because I'm very good at building relationships. I'm very good at listening to people, and I'm very good at showing that I value the expertise that they bring to the table. So that, I don't know if I would say stressed. I would say that is going to be the challenge. It's a challenge that I embrace because I like meeting new people and doing new things and learning new things. I have a lot of curiosities already about Shrewsbury, about how different things are working and what programs and how they interact. I was trying to figure out, the middle school math program and which one it was, and it looks like it's kind of self-developed. So that's a good question that, I want to dig into, or would love to be able to dig into at some point. And what the philosophical, one of my key, I was the 5 through 8 middle school math person in Bridgewater Raynham, so it's kind of one of my things. But so where does all of that come from, and how does it all work? So there's all sorts of questions I already have just from spending one day here, and I need to be patient about trying to get them all answered. But it is something that I enjoy, that intellectual curiosity and looking at what is working and how it is working and how it is put together, because it's a little bit different in each district and how that context works. And it's absolutely and I have learned things from every district that I have been about different ways to do things. Doesn't necessarily it's going to play well, in Shrewsbury, but there's different ways to do things. I mean, one thing that Mashpee did really, really well was internships and capstone. Huge game changer for kids, but it's also a small school. There's 100 kids in the graduating class, so there's a scale issue there, right? So how would that work? If we're going to scale it up, which we might be doing because of the new graduation requirements, right? So there's all these things that are coming in, and that intellectual curiosity that I bring to it, I really think is a benefit to that, plus the experience that I bring from other districts and how they have approached different and solved different problems, is the baggage or the benefit that I bring to the table. But with that, the understanding that just because we did it this way over here does not mean it's going to be the way it needs to work over here. So again, being patient about how that rolls out, being patient to dig in and make good decisions, and ensure that they're the best decisions collectively. And that's an administrative team thing, that's a school committee thing, that's a community thing. What are the best decisions we need to make to continue the path that we're on?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
With all that you've learned today about Shrewsbury Public Schools, what do you see as our district's greatest challenge and opportunity?
I don't know if that's a fair question, John. I don't think I can do that in one day. Well, I think that the challenge, honestly, is going to be, and it's a great challenge to have. The challenge is, how do you keep going onward and upward from here? But that's a great challenge to have. I mean, you've got an incredible base here, but it's like anything. Once you get above 80 or 90%, how do you get to getting to 100? Right? Is the most difficult piece, right? So I'm actually kind of excited about that challenge and having that conversation. As far as the advantage, and I said this with Dr. Sawyer this morning. And I said it I think a couple other places, but the fiscal stability has allowed this district to really strategically plan to do the work and get the results that you're getting. So that is a huge advantage. If we can continue to work together to continue that, I don't think there's a ceiling that we can see yet. So those are, I guess that would be, but that's a great challenge to have. I mean, the number of kids that are leaving that high school and going to college is a number I've never seen anywhere else before. And from what I'm told, they're doing well while they're there as well. So it's not just that they get in, and that's a tribute. And it's obviously high school deserves credit, but that goes pre-K to 12, and you can see those blocks building. So there's good bones, as my grandmother would say, right? Yeah.
I think that he's answered the next question that I have, so we can go to Roseanne.
Sure. This is the final question. Why are you the right leader for Shrewsbury Public Schools at this time?
Why am I the right?
The right leader for Shrewsbury Public Schools at this time?
Well, the short answer is because I'm awesome. But no, seriously, you have a high-performing district. You have a great culture and climate. You have someone that understands the work that has been done because they have done it elsewhere. And you have someone that brings the experience to continue to improve this district. You also have someone who has a very high ethical standard and moral compass, that believes in providing so that all children can be successful. I think philosophically, there is an alignment here that is very well connected at this point. And you have someone that is dedicated to building the capacity of the people in the district to achieve at high levels. And, you know, I bring that experience and have done that work in other places. So adapting what I have learned to this context would be easier. I won't say easy, but you know, that experience that I bring, that perspective that I bring, I think that it matches where you have been. It is work that I have dedicated my career to and work that I want to continue. I think I said before, I'm looking for that long-term home. I'm done with the one and done thing. I really want to settle in, you know, dig in and get back to that strategic outlook and thoughtfulness and developing. And with my experience, I bring that to the table.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For your time tonight.
Thank you. There isn't a bonus question. I don't get to go into the bonus.
No bonus round.
Hoping to get into the bonus, but thank you. It's been, you know, an incredible day. It was wonderful meeting all of you. You have a lot to be proud of, and I honestly would love to be part of it. I know it is, you know, probably the most important decision the school committee makes, and I respect that, and I respect your work in doing it. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you and good night.